away. Okay, a couple of slides that I've kept in there from the previous one. Let's go to the first one of those. So this particular project of mine, Sheila, you said you're worried that I might not have enough time. I do a lot of things, and this is one of them. I'm currently, I publish a monthly magazine called the Monthly Mineral Chronicles, and I'm doing the Illustrated Minerals of Australia as part of that, and it's coming out in parts each month. So as I said, we've just finished the letter B. The next issue will be out hopefully late today, and that will be the first part of minerals beginning with C, and then we're going to work our way all the way through to the end of the alphabet. Now, a couple of slides that I've showed before, but I'll do again, or slightly updated in this case. So there's around a bit over 1,500 species that have been recorded in Australia. So that's according to MinDat plus some additional information that I'm aware of. We have 182 type locality species, and there'll be about 800 or a little bit over 800 different species that will be illustrated in the publication by the time we get to the end of it. For the minerals beginning with the letter B, we have over 100 species. There'll be around about half of those illustrated in the actual publication itself. And in this presentation, there's a bit less than that, but there'll be 126 specimen photographs. So as we go through in the publication, you don't just get one photo of a species. There are photos of different habits, different localities, and so on, to try and round it out as much as possible. And just a recap of the country of Australia. It's made up of 5 states and a couple of territories, plus a few add-ons like Christmas Island and there's sub-Antarctic area and a couple of others. I live in Victoria, which is pretty well just underneath where the eye of Victoria is. It's a very large country. From Melbourne, which is at the point of there, to where I live is just over 100 kilometres. It's about 3,500 kilometres from side to side, and it's a very large area to cover. In terms of geology, just very quickly, the oldest rocks generally are over in the west of the country, a little bit in South Australia as well, and they progressively get younger as we move from west to east over the continent. Tasmania has a few pre-Cambrian rocks down in the bottom corner as well. And move straight into the minerals themselves. Most of the photos are going to be photos that I have taken of specimens in my collection, with some exceptions. And where there are exceptions, I've noted those. So, for instance, here, Mark Willoughby from South Australia has provided a photo of Bailey claw. I don't have a specimen of Bailey claw. It's very rare. It comes from one locality, two localities in Australia, to type locality in Queensland, and an occurrence in Tasmania as well. I haven't seen any of the Tasmanian ones though. It's a chlorite group mineral, so basically green. Not that interesting to look at, but it's a fairly complex chemical formula. To get a chlorite with zinc in it, for instance, is quite unusual, if not unique. So that's our first one, Bailey claw. Banistrite is a much more, not an aesthetic mineral in itself, but is combined with aesthetic minerals in many instances. So the black mineral here is the banistrite, so a manganese oxide, and in Broken Hill, there's 2 areas in two mines in Broken Hill noted there. In this instance, it's with rhodonite, which is a beautiful red crystal. This is a James Melville specimen. This is one in my collection, which is more banisterite and less rhodonite, but it's still associated with the rhodonite. And you can see it's quite a sort of a platy habit in this particular instance. Then we have Barbose Light, another ugly mineral. There's B minerals, there's a few of them are a bit ugly. So it forms a sort of black to a dark green, fairly massive mineral, and it's a primary phosphate. It is very rare, even though it's just an iron phosphate. You'd think that probably there would be more, but in Australia there's not too many examples of it, and I don't think worldwide there's that many. And it doesn't normally occur as anything other than just massive granular. One of the pharmacosiderite minerals, Barito Calcite, is a little bit more aesthetic. It's very difficult to distinguish visually from other pharmacosiderites, and generally needs to be analysed. This particular specimen here has been analysed from Mount Malvern in South Australia, and it occurs at a couple of other localities. I think the first locality that it was found at in Australia was the Clunes locality, the Port Phillip mine, and that's about 30 kilometres away from where I live. Another very attractive specimen, but very, very rare, it's Synchrocyte, which is a barium-rich synchrocyte species, and it only occurs at the one locality, which is the Spring Creek mine in South Australia. Another rare one, and another type locality specimen, Boleoite. Now this is quite difficult to tell from a couple of the other associated minerals. There are quite a few very rare halide minerals, and particularly nitrate minerals, copper nitrate minerals in the Great Australia Mine, or from the Great Australia Mine. And I think what had happened here was, like, nitrates are generally not that common, and they can alter fairly quickly. But these particular ones, so this is not a nitrate, but it's associated with them. So these particular minerals were trapped within massive cuprite, and it's protected them over time. For the nitrate, so the Gerhardite has nitrate in it, I think. They believe that the nitrates actually formed through termite nests, with the nitrogen coming from termite nests, which is an unusual way of sort of biogenic mineral, and quite an unusual thing to happen. Boleoite forms beautiful hexagonal blue crystals, but it is very, very hard to pick out. This one is, it was found by the person that originally found the species there. Barite's a lot more common and comes in a range of habits, and that can be a range of different colours, a range of different forms, a range of different translucency. Some can be transparent, some can be opaque, and there are a lot of, oh, I've got an error in there, I apologise for that. That's selected Australian occurrences should not be there. That's obviously from the previous slide. Bugger. I have to fix that. That's a bit better. So we've got a whole range of areas throughout Australia. Broken Hill is one of the fairly well-known ones, but it can be found in pretty well every state and territory. You can see here, even the Australian Capital Territory, which is very small, has a mine, that the Paddy's River copper mine, that has barite as an occurrence. There's another Broken Hill specimen, and a whole load of more occurrences, Australian occurrences. An unusual one, I think most of you would be aware of the Asiarite suns from the Malbunka copper mine in the Northern Territory. There are a few other minerals that occur there, not very many, it's mostly Asiarite. And Barite is one of them, but it's very rare. And it's these small colourless to white crystals. In fact, all of this here, all of this white material is Barite. Just got a very good, Richard. Sorry, I saw the chat come up, but I didn't see what was in there. A Sunset Mine, Queensland Barite. Mount Isa, the barites, some of the barites from here are unusual, and they actually have copper inclusions, which is obviously these are goethite balls that are grown on the outside, but some quite nice copper included barite that came from one particular level in the mine. Go to South Australia, the Patalicoide mine, which is well known for its fluorescent minerals. Sorry, Patalicoide mine, EZ mine, Patalicoide mine. It's two different names from the same place. Kapunda in South Australia. That's a very complex crystal form. Another barite with inclusions. In this particular instance, the little sparkly bits are all chalcopyrite crystals included in the barite from Mount Lyell and Tasmania. And probably the best known of the Tasmanian localities is Rosebery, where you get these beautiful golden barites. That's Matthew Latham specimen. Another Prince Lyell one, Mount Lyell one, encrusted with hematite in this particular instance, and an unusual sort of a rind. You can see a bit of zoning in the barite there. You don't often see that. And from Victoria, a lot of the zeolite localities also have barite occurring at them. So a lot of the basalts. That's calcite in the top right-hand corner there. Another one from the basalt area, Phillip Island. And there's a couple of localities in central Victoria that have unusual blue barite, Heathcote being one of them. I actually found this locality earlier this year or late last year, I forget. Time goes sort of fairly quickly during COVID. And there is nothing left there anymore. Even the road that it was on has been closed off and is just basically a bush track now. The other area is Rochester, which is about 50 kilometres north of Heathcote. And at Rochester, it's, I think, still a working quarry. And you do get crystals, but also some nodules of barite. This particular nodule here is probably about 7 or 8, well, maybe 7 centimetres in length. And you can actually look through it and see the barite, the blue of the barite going all the way through. And my daughter actually found that underneath my feet when she was about 8 or 9 and gave it to me, which was very nice of her. Nice bit of play of colours in the barite from Rochester, and one of the colourless ones from there. And we have one occurrence that I'm aware of, and only the one, of Septerian nodules with barite. I know that can be fairly common in other parts of the world, but in Australia, it's an uncommon form. We don't have very many Septerian nodule localities anyway. And we don't know the exact location of this one, though. We just know that it's in northern Western Australia, which could be a fairly large area. Moving on, we go to Barito Calcite, which again is a rare mineral in Australia, only found in a couple of localities, but the finds at Rosebery in Tasmania over the last few years have been very significant. So there have been specimens that have been metres in length that have been found. And you can see here, this top one here, that's Matthew Latham specimen, 143 millimeters there. It's a small piece. This one's 120, which is also small.
Hey, Steve.
Yep.
Do you know if that stuff fluoresces?
I think it does, but I don't think it's all that strong.
Okay.
I'd have to double check it. Another rare one is, well, perhaps rare, is Basanite, calcium sulfate, and it quite often occurs as pseudomorphs after gypsum, so it occurs in dry lake beds, but it's only been reported from the one locality in South Australia, but we do have very similar localities in the arid areas, and it could be that it's actually more common than what it appears to be, but just overlooked because it's a fairly nondescript looking mineral. Another pretty one is the Basanite. It's a group of rare earth minerals, and we've got a couple that have been found in Australia. So Basanite CE from Broken Hill, such as this specimen here, and then Basanite LA from both the Monacoff mine in Queensland and from Barito in South Australia, and the latter one, which you'll see in a minute, are beautiful blue crystals. There's another Broken Hill one, and a third Broken Hill one. This one here, these are Myrmitite crystals, the yellowy green, and the Basanite are these little orange ones. You can see there's a lot of individual crystals there. And I think the white mineral is possibly kaolinite. That's the blue Basanite LA from Barito. So it's the colour caused by copper. Another rare one, very attractive but very, very, very tiny crystals. This was only described by Peter Elliott a few years ago. It's an unusual combination of elements. There would have been a molybdenum in there, as well as the uranium and the barium. And it's a type and only locality of Radium Hill in South Australia. Bivonite's one of the beryllium minerals, usually forms where Beryl has altered. And these little crystals here, these little bladed ones, are the Bivonite crystals. And that's sitting in a Ferrone magnesite from Mount Bischoff in Tasmania. It's found in a few localities in Tasmania, and another unusual form over in Western Australia, which is this white to pale green compact material. I've only read about it. I haven't actually seen any of that. Here's another one where you can see the crystals a little bit easier, and that's because the magnesite has oxidized a bit more. So you get a good very clearly see the crystal, the colourless crystals, even though they've got a bit of goethite staining against the brown background. And from the Kara mine, this is one of the Kara mine specimens, where it's more of an aggregate of crystals and white rather than colourless. Baledonite is generally an uncommon mineral. At Broken Hill, though, it is probably the most common of the copper arsenates in the areas that it occurs, and it's been recorded at a few other localities around the country. And this particular one, some of you would have probably seen this before in my Broken Hill presentation, but I quite like this one because you've got some of the faces, sort of rounded crystals, but faces like this one here, which are like a mirror, almost like a cleavage plane that you get on something like calcite, but they're not actually cleaved. So it's just the growth of the crystal. And Baledonite here with Olivenite, which is the small green crystals here. This is the Baledonite. We've got Heidelgoite, which is the yellowy coloured stuff, and then we've got the tips of Pneumatic Crystals poking out of the Heidelgoite. And a South Australian one, a little bit more bluish on the South Australian one. Beaverite's another one of the ugly ones. It's generally earthy sort of aggregates. It's probably more common again than most people think, because it's going to be overlooked. Generally sort of just a coating, and people will just say, oh, it's just an ugly green or black or whatever coating. So here we've got Pneumatic Crystals, which are these little slightly yellowish ones sitting on Beaverite CU, which is the underlying greenish grey. It does occur in a few different places though. This particular one here, the sort of olivey green area is Beaverite, and that has the classic malachite after azurite pseudomorphs from Wim Creek, and also the little wolfenites dotted around as well. Boronite is one of the iron phosphates. It's fairly uncommon. In this particular instance, this is associated with chalcosiderite, the little green areas, and the boronite is this white fibrous material here. Found at quite a few localities, including Campbell's Creek, which I actually got to about a week and a half ago. But there are 4 phosphates that occur there, including boronite, and that was the only one we didn't find. But there you go. There's Spring Creek, more of a olive green and less fibrous, more bladed. And back to another fibrous one here with green balls of Plymerite. We have Beryllium, which is a manganese phosphate, and occurs usually as red or brownish stacks of crystals. You don't generally get individual crystals that sort of sit out saying, photograph me, photograph me. It's just more masses of crystals like this. And a few localities, this one being Bulkamata in South Australia, and this one from the Iron Monarch and John Hope specimen. Berthiorite is one of the sulfide salts and is pretty well impossible to distinguish visually from other sulfide salt minerals that also occurred in the same sort of habit. You could pick this up and think that it's any number of different things, but this particular one has been analysed. It is fairly relatively common, I suppose, in antimony deposits around the country, but very, very difficult to identify, to confirm, I should say. Another one of the Beryllium secondary minerals, Bertrandite, probably less common from a collector perspective than the Barbonites, certainly for me. This particular one is from the Triple Chance mine, which is well known for Beryl, for very large Beryl crystals. We'll come on to that when we get to Beryl. And it's these sort of blocky crystals here. There's the Beryl. So here's the Triple Chance mine. So I know that this is the Micromount Club, and this is definitely not a Micromount. This particular one is about 230 millimeters tall, and is one of the Beryl crystals that's on display in Broken Hill at the Sulphide Street Railway and Historical Museum. And there's a large cabinet there with some very big, relatively big Beryl crystals, and well-formed Beryl crystals. And it was actually operated at one stage for beryllium metal for NASA, which is interesting. And this was one of the famous specimens that was found, the Beryl Cross, also on display. And one that I found probably more interesting than the others is this one, where they actually tried to melt the Beryl crystal to get the beryllium mineral out of it, and they melted it with a blowtorch, and that's what happened to it. So very good, Paul. Of course, Beryl comes in different forms. This is an emerald from Torrington, and I included this here. It's not a terminated crystal; it's a single crystal. I included it to show that the conchoidal sort of fracture that you can get with Beryl crystals, which is fairly typical. But of course, it also does occur as aquamarine and morganite, probably not so much, but this one's just standard Beryl. We've got supposedly, this one is a Heliodor. It's yellow, but whether it's classed as Heliodor, which is really more a gem quality term or not, I don't know. And then we've got a bluish one here from South Australia. A blue one that I collected in Tasmania, when you could actually get to this area of the mine called the Slaughter Face, which is an interesting name for a part of a mine. I have no idea why it was called the Slaughter Face, unless they had some sort of animal enclosure there at some point. But it is a tin mine, of course, at Mount Bischoff. And in recent operations over the last 10 to 15 years, that area has been basically quarried away, which is a pity because there was some quite interesting minerals there. Another Tasmanian one on the left-hand side. This is actually in the Petard collection in Tasmanian Museum. And that the X1364 was tags put on and catalogue numbers put on in the sort of 1970s onwards. But the actual specimen from Petard dates back to around about the turn of the previous century. Petard actually died in 1910, so it would have been prior to that. And then over in Western Australia, we have these very attractive white beryls. They're just opaque, but quite well formed from the Tabba pegmatite. And we can't sort of go past the Western Australian emeralds as well. So that's 90 millimeters across there. So that's probably about a centimetre long, that particular crystal. And they're in a biotite mica schist and quite well protected in many instances. And I believe that I'm not sure if it's the Mungari one or one of the other ones, but there is still specimen mining occurring there, and you can actually get hold of emerald specimens. Excuse me. Another generally ugly mineral is Betpactolite, and there are now 3 distinct species that have been recorded. And the FE version, this third one here, Victoria has the type locality with that, which is a molybdenite deposit at Mount Malayagal. And I've actually collected there on a few occasions now. This particular one here from New South Wales is just a sort of an earthy crust. It has been analysed. You wouldn't know that this was Betpactolite unless you analysed it. However, this one, from the type locality, these crystals here are the Betpactolite, sort of pseudo-hexagonal, with ferrium molybdite. Budantite, one of the lead iron arsenates, and it used to be that everything from Broken Hill that looked like this was called budantite, but there's a whole range of different species now, and also series between, and makes it very difficult to visually identify. So generally, unless it's been analysed. Ones like this are generally now referred to as Budantite segmatite series. Excuse me. And in this case with a brown carbonite, or red and brown carbonite. And you can get both where the plot, the particular mineral occurs on the plot between the two can be closer to one end or the other, but without analysis, you're just not going to know. However, at the Mount Malvern mine, I believe it's more at the Budantite end. And again, this is with carbonite. One of the bismuth secondary minerals that is again fairly rare in Australia is Baorite. And this is actually probably a mixture of Baorite plus other phases. And it's just massive material again. It doesn't form as crystals, maybe slightly platy, but generally earthy masses. And you can see here, same thing. This is Baorite, this pale greenish material with pneumatite, which is the yellow. And there's probably the best crystals that you're going to find. Not very crystal-like, just platy. Another rare one is Buberite. There's a cobalt sulfate. It generally occurs as an efflorescence post-mining. This one is the only locality that I'm aware of in Australia from Dome Rock. You do get, there's a few other cobalt localities where you could get this material, but it hasn't been formally identified. So Mount Cobalt, for instance, in Queensland is a candidate for it. But it's basically just a pink crust, and that's the pink material you can see through there. Oh, definitely an ugly one. There's quite a lot of ugly ones tonight. Biphosphomite. This is type locality piece. It's a guano phosphate mineral, so bats have a hand in creating it, and this is about as good as it gets in terms of aesthetics. This one's a bit more aesthetic though, but probably even rarer than the previous one. So Bertrand is one of a small number of secondary cadmium species that have been identified over the last few years by Peter Elliott from New South Wales, from Broken Hill. And Bertrand is this pale blue acicular mineral here. You can see that it would be very easy to confuse this with something like Barito Calcite. But I do know this one has been analysed, so I'm confident with that. Bismuth is another secondary bismuth mineral. Again, difficult to confirm visually. Quite often there's sort of this almost like a cotton woolly sort of effect. Does occur at a few places. Bismuclite is this pale pinkish, creamish pink material here. Again, not very aesthetic, but it's just a rare species, fairly rare species. Even bismuth itself is not that common. There are a few places where it is found. In this particular instance, we've got bismuth, you can see the bismuth crystals through here, as it formed intimately intergrown with molybdenite. And one of the better known localities is Wolfram Camp in Queensland. This bismuth mass at the top here. Sometimes you'll see so-called crystals of bismuth, particularly from places like Wolfram Camp. But what's actually happened is that the bismuth has actually formed in between quartz crystals, and the quartz crystals have broken away, and it gives the appearance of the remains of a bismuth crystal, but it's actually just a mass of bismuth that has faces on it that are really just there because of the the imprint from the quartz, essentially. Tasmanian specimen. Another Tasmanian one. This one's actually an inclusion in a topaz crystal. And another one from near where I live. This is 25, 30 kilometres away from me. Wolfram mine at Pitong. And some quite nice bismuth specimens have been found there. Only small generally. And we have another bismuth mineral, bismuthinite, another one that is difficult to pick from other sulfur salts and also from stibnite. But it is fairly widespread, occurs in a lot of places, many instances as massive ore material rather than specimen grade material. That one's from Kingsgate. This one is inclusions of bismuthinite in quartz. Excuse me. And I actually collected that one myself at the Anchor Mine in Tasmania many years ago. And from Victoria, an interesting one we've got, that's actually a bismuth crystal with bismuthinite, and it's all included in fluorite, which is quite an attractive combination. Bismutite, another one of the secondaries. It doesn't normally occur as such colourful aesthetic specimens as this one. It's normally a bit paler than that, such as that one. Or downright ugly. This is the bismuthinite material here. Sorry, bismutite material here. And this is a crystal of bismutite, just this one crystal here, in a scorodite quartz, scorodite vug from Pitong. Another rare one, this is a type locality and only locality specimen of Bleasdaleite. It's the yellowish little druzy crystals. Very rare, another bismuth mineral, surprisingly, B, bismuth. And another secondary post-mining mineral, Baledonite. Presume that's how it's pronounced. And it's only been reported from a couple of localities. Boberite, a magnesium phosphate, another ugly one, but this occurs in pegmatites, alteration of primary phosphate material, and it's this sort of orangey tan coloured stuff. Bromide is an aluminium ore species, and it is in this particular specimen. Just don't ask me to pick a point and say that's Beryllium, that's Boronite, or whatever. It's not actually visible. Very attractive but very rare mineral is Boleoite. And these are, it's very hard to photograph these. This is a John Haupt photo, but it's very difficult to, because they're so small and generally tucked into vugs. It's hard to get a good photograph. One of the uranium minerals, the secondary minerals, Boleoite. Now, in this particular instance, the Boleoite is this orange, these tiny little orange crystals with yellow uranophane. Boronite is a fairly common copper sulfide, but quite often just an ore mineral and very difficult to tell apart from other copper sulfides that are usually mixed in with it. It does have this characteristic sort of iridescent effect that you can see on here. This is from New South Wales and is actually formed in between blades or whatever of wollastonite crystals, I suppose you call them. And the best known occurrence is in Tasmania with what's locally known as peacock ore. But a lot of the so-called peacock ore, Boronite, from Mount Lyell is actually chalcopyrite that's been pickled, and it's not actually Boronite. but it's sold to tourists as peacock ore. A rare occurrence is this Boronite after pyrite from Burra in South Australia. And this is a typical Tasmanian material. If you get a piece of chalcopyrite and pickle it, that's the sort of look that you get, but this is actually a Boronite specimen.
What do you mean by pickle it?
You put it into an acid.
Okay.
Don't ask me which one. I don't do acids. Paul Vandenbergen might be able to help with that. He's more of a chemistry person than I am. Patalicoide is a rare copper chloride. And again, it's pretty difficult to pick this from some of the other copper minerals as well. Just only been found in a couple of confirmed in a couple of localities. Botryogen. This one is nice crystals of this particular mineral, and it's usually more massive than this. And this is from Mount Isa. Baledonite, I think we had Frank did a talk on Baledonite and other rings a while back, and this is Tasmanian Baledonite rings from the Rosebery mine. But quite often you can get bent crystals, such as, well, it's not even bent, it's curved crystals. They can be quite difficult to photograph because they tend to move with the slightest breeze, particularly with micros, because they're so small. And to get something in to stay in focus can be quite a challenge. That's more of a mass of hairs, and this is from Zeehan, which is a bit further south in Tasmania. And one from Victoria, from Heathcote, sitting in a little quartz vug. This is actually an area where there's quite a few stibnite specimens being found as well. And another sulfo salt, Boronite, nothing like the Cornish ones, but still interesting. And you can see the start of a sort of cogwheel form on this particular one. These are arsenopyrite crystals down the bottom left-hand corner. That's from Tolwong in New South Wales. Another one from Tolwong. And then a Victorian one, and this is a different habit. It's one that I actually found before I actually moved to Tasmania. So this dates back 35 years maybe, when I collected at Woods Point. Another ugly one, Branorite. This is Thorium Branorite, which is pretty well metamict. So generally, always it's going to be amorphous, opaque, and dull. Oh, acetic acid, pickling onions. You don't know, Paul. Oh, I'm distraught. And a very rare one, Brazilianite. This has only been found in the one locality, pegmatites in Mount Wales, Victoria, found by Ryan Eagle. And it's this yellow massive material here. Certainly very different to the Brazilian specimens. Brian Youngite is another one that is overlooked, I think, quite a bit. It is probably fairly common in parts of, or was common in parts of the open cuts, but a lot of people thought that this was either gypsum or hemimorphite or whatever, these very tiny little sprays. But interestingly, this is 3.5 millimeters here. This is pyromorphite. This is pyromorphite. This one is stoltzite. And I actually collected some of these stoltzites at the bottom of the Kintor open cut back in about 1990, I think. And the largest stoltzite that I saw on the day was collected by somebody from New South Wales, and that was about 2.5 centimeters in length, and a grey, sort of colourless to grey colour. Brushantite, generally bluish green, again can be difficult to pick from some of the other copper minerals, but fairly widespread. You can see the bluish green in this one here as well. That's one of my favourite ones from Mount Isa. And one from Cloncurry from Great Australia Mine. South Australian version, a bit more fibrous. And then we move on to one of the silver minerals, so silver bromide. And I included this here just to show some of the analysis that have been done. So a lot of the silver chlorides at Broken Hill are chloride, they fit in this part here, but they're bromium rich. So they're generally called bromium chloride or embolite, which was the term that used to be given to them. You do have some that actually sit in the bromiderite side. There's a little bit of, probably shouldn't say iodiderite there, probably just say iodine, because iodiderite is hexagonal, these are cubic. But you can see here how many of these are right on the border of the two. Unless you analyse them, you're actually not going to know generally which one it's going to be, and they look the same. They very often look the same. And they're also zoned as well in many instances. Now this is one that has been analysed. It's a bromiderite from Kintor, but it's quite a sharp crystal as well, which is good. Normally they tend to be a bit more rounded, and quite often they're not this colour, because once they've been let out into the light, they can alter sometimes very quickly, but most often over a period of time. And another analysed one is Teutonic Bore in Western Australia. So it's native silver here with bromiderite, quite bright bromiderite crystals. Another beryllium mineral, bromelite, noted as a minor ore mineral at Bollinger's mine. And this is what a minor ore mineral looks like. It's this sort of pinky material around here, sort of platey pinky. Brookite is less common than the other titanium polymorphs, anatase and rutile, but it can occur alongside both of them, or one or both of them. Not that common, quite often colour zoned. We've got one here from Wallangra in New South Wales, one from Bundalia in South Australia. So this one here, there's a bit of rutile here, and there's a couple of anatases in places like that as well. One from Victoria, Pyramid Hill Quarry, is the brookite here. These are the anatase. Brucite's another fairly rare mineral. It's pretty soft and sort of pearly, waxy feeling. It does occur mostly in serpentinite deposits, which is what each of these are. And this is an unusual one in that it's more sort of bluey green than usual. Another ugly one, although it's a very nice glass vial that this is in. Brushite, which is another one of the guano cave deposit minerals. Bulfontenite, another rare one occurring in in this case in Chesney Island, Victoria, and it's this material through here. Bustamite, best known from Broken Hill, where it can occur from microfibrous habit up to many meter long crystals. And can be very attractive. There's some discussion recently, certainly with rhodonites. There are rhodonites and ferrorhodonites and vitinkiite, I think, which are all very similar in chemical composition, and they grade off also to Bastonite. So you'll get some, like this one is definitely a Bastonite based on colour, sitting in sort of a galena matrix. But these will tend to be more pink to almost to a reddish brown. And the rhodonites can be more of a brownish red. And it gets to a point where it's very difficult to actually tell whether it's a Bastonite or a rhodonite or related mineral. This is more of the sort of tending towards the fibrous habit of Bastonite. Another one of the very rare copper nitrates from the Great Australian Mine, Butkin Barkite. Now, you've got to look closely on this one. So what you've actually got here is Gerhardite, which is this bluish-green material here. And then if you look in the middle here, you can see little sprays of what looks like conrolite. And there's actually a series between Butkin Barkite and conrolite, one being a copper chloride and the other one being copper nitrate. And generally, unless you analyse them, you don't know which end of the spectrum it is. But this one isn't analysed, but because it is actually enclosed in the vug with the nitrate minerals, it's more likely to be Butkin Barkite. Oh, and there we go. That's the end of it. And I'll stop share and take any questions.
That's brilliant.
I have a question, I think.
Very good.
Sorry, Hank, what was that?
Yeah, first of all, great. You know, I have a collection from there also by now.
Yes.
And I saw a lot of things I recognize, so that's great. But I have one question about the bismuthinite.
Yep.
You showed us bismuthinite in quartz and in fluorite. Are you sure about that? Because I went to the eastern part of Germany, and Ore Mountains, it's called, I believe, Erzgebirge. And there you can't make any distinction between bismuthinite and amplactite. But the only thing you know is that bismuthinite is always in fluorite and amplactite is always in quartz. And we never saw any bismuthinite in quartz.
That's a good point. The one in quartz, the Heathcote one hasn't been analysed, but the Tasmanian one has. Not the specimen that's enclosed in the quartz, but a specimen from the same find. Ralph Bottrell would have analysed that way back. But yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to it, Hank.
Well, that's it. I know that is the case in Eastern Germany.
I think it's definitely an interesting quandary for mineral collectors, particularly micro mineral collectors, in that you have so many minerals these days that can form series or can be zoned, or can have a slightly different chemical composition, even sitting next to one another, that visually it is very difficult to determine. And so what I do is I go by, well, obviously if I've got something analysed, that's the number one. If I've got something that's come from an area where there has been a specimen analysed, that's the next one that comes down. And then you gradually work down to, yeah, visually this is what I believe it is. But you've got to pick a point somewhere where you say,
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But that, it's almost impossible to analyze everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you get poor. Yeah, you get poor. Yeah. It's far too expensive.
Yeah, exactly.
Another remark I have a second remark. You showed us Barbose Light.
Yes.
And you told us that it's black, of course, it's always black, but it's never ever or very rare found in crystals.
Yes.
And personally, I found crystals, but very small ones, very tiny ones, in Portugal, in Formosinho. That gives Barbose Light as very small black crystals.
Can I just put one little sort of rider on it? my comments were really in relation to Australian
Yeah, sure, of course.
occurrences.
No, okay. Sure, I know.
Yeah. But yeah, it's I mean, again, there are a few minerals around that you might get 99.99% of them are only found in one habit or one form, and you might get one locality where it's exceptional.
I even have a birdshite or so.
Yeah. So if you think about some of the Chinese borate minerals, for instance, that have come out in recent years, Olshanskyite and Roite. The Olshanskyite, I think, was originally found in the Fuga mine in Japan, and it was basically.
I'm sorry, but I think you have to spell that. What's the name?
Olshanskyite, Olyshan.
I think that's different in Dutch.
But it's an example of where for decades there were tiny little micro crystals, if you were lucky, of this really rare mineral, and now you've got this one mine in China. There's a Rocks and Minerals article recently this year, I think, which has published about it, and other rare borates that are being found in centimeter-sized crystals.
Right.
So best in the world. So you just never know.
No, you have to be very lucky also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Steve, I've got a question. I don't have that many Australian minerals, but I have a bismite.
Yep.
And looking at a picture of it, I can see there's 4 different things on the specimen, but it's only labeled bismite. And so you said the bismite was white stuff?
White or yellow.
Went by really fast.
Yeah.
You know what it normally is with?
Well, it'll be with other bismuth secondary minerals generally, but there's things like cannonite, probably molybdenum secondaries as well. What's the locality? Is it Kingsgate? Or?
It says old 25 pipe, then pipe.
Oh yeah, 14. That's Kingsgate. Yes. So if you have a look on Mindat, you'll see that, and put in, how you can. When you get your list of minerals, you can click on an element. So if you just do bismuth, it'll show you just the bismuth minerals from there, and you can narrow it down a bit. But
my other comment there was, I have an XRF that I can use occasionally. All it's good for really is excluding stuff. Because I can't, with something this small, I'm aiming at the entire rock.
Yeah.
But I could tell, oh wait, it's got aluminum, and none of these things have aluminum. That doesn't help, or something like that, or it doesn't have what it's supposed to have. But it's a pain to analyze anything.
I challenge this notion that you can use Mindat to exclude minerals based on whether they've got bismuth in them or not. But you can't tell half the time.
No, but it's a game.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
I like to go to the pictures, but still, again, with using the XRF, I can tell that like a quarter of the labels I get are wrong.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it. You have a what? A XR? Doug?
XRF.
X-ray fluorescence.
XRF, okay.
It's a little handheld.
Which is what?
When I say
it's an analytical technique. You fire an X-ray at the specimen and you look at the radiation that comes back because it's been excited by the X-rays, and it's characteristic of the elements.
It's
good. I'm going to write that down.
It's used
for everything, and it doesn't. It's not. Every time I say, "Hey, does it measure, like, for example, cesium?" and they're like, "Well, for an extra $200, we can configure it to do that."
Yeah, they used a lot. They used a lot in like scrap metal yards and
my wife owns
precious metal recovery.
Yeah, my wife owns a metal manufacturing company, and so they use it to see when somebody complains, "Why did this rust?" and they can check what the metal was and whether or not it was made right, or check their scrap and stuff.
Another area they use it that's quite fun, in my opinion, is when you are doing things like gold prospecting through old malachite. You have your crushed material running up a conveyor belt, and if the XRF finds some gold, because it penetrates, they push that bit off to the side and say, "There's a bit of gold in there somewhere, and we'll go find it later."
I know that Ralph Bottrell in Tassie has access to one as well, so the mines department, and he's taken her on a few field trips, and they've actually been able to pick some likely minerals based on just point and shoot in the quarry or in the mine or whatever. So it's useful.
There's much bigger ones that I've seen for mines, and they'll, you know, they can run the cores through or stuff like that.
This one's probably a similar size case to yours, but it'd be nice to have one as part of your armory.
It's
so.
nice, but it would be better. Well, I said the other technique is to send your kid to school and have access to the electron microscope, but then you have to actually say, could you please do this? And you have to ask about 100 times before they do.
I think about 3, maybe 4 years ago, there was a Go Start Me or whatever fund where they were trying to develop an XRF thing that plugged into your phone, but it didn't seem to go anywhere. So
I've seen a spectrometer, but I don't even know if that's
well,
accurate enough to help.
Yeah, this was going to be used supposedly more for things like food, what was in foods and stuff like that. So
yeah, I thought that was FTIR based as opposed to XRF.
Well,
maybe, I don't know.
They're also doing ramen. I was looking at ramen, and basically the database.
I love ramen.
Yeah, 30K. I know.
But they also, the database wasn't for minerals. The database had pharmaceuticals. So
Yeah, I know.
But that's
Steve,
the problem with ramen. Yeah.
Steve, can we could we do a session on cheap analyzing techniques?
I'd need probably somebody else to run that one, but yes. I'll make a note of it and see if we can organize something.
Define cheap.
Cheap, define cheap. Yeah, cheap.
cheap would be where you can send it.
Things that I can use. Things I can use at home.
There are places that'll do an analysis for $10 if you send them something they can powder.
Yeah,
but finding the thing you are willing to powder is hard.
I know. But the fun would be that you can do it yourself.
The cheapest method I know of is to claim something is something it's obviously not and put a photo on internet. You'll get a very accurate response very quickly if you do that.
Say it again.
You put a photo up on the internet and claim it's something that is definitely not.
Oh yeah. That's what Corona does too.
The other way to do it is lately I've taken a bunch of rocks. I don't know what this is, and I drop vinegar on it. It doesn't do anything, so I drop hydrochloric acid and it goes nuts. And then I just say, well, it must be calcite. but not rough enough to vinegar. Vinegar is bad.
So you're dividing the world into calcite and not calcite.
Carbonate and not carbonate, yeah.
Yeah.
Calcite and calcite.
Well, even I could do that.
I mean, there is a lot you can do with very simple techniques. Density is one of my favorite ones. It's actually quite,
Except,
it's okay for one mineral, but if you have a whole rock, how do you?
Yes, exactly.
Or even worse, if you have a dot on a rock, it's a little micro specimen. Mike, I know that this is something that you like to get involved in as well, Mike.
Pretty cool.
So maybe we could do one that's more of a generic identification techniques or something along those lines.
Yeah, simple things.
Yeah. Might look at doing something along those lines, and you can incorporate the analysis as part of it. So
yeah, sure.
I know a lot of people have different ways of working out what they've got. For me personally, I found very early on that I had a very good memory for being able to put a name to something that I'd seen before, and that's how I first started in identifying minerals. But not everybody can do that either. So, and it's not always right. So,
I can see very small color differences, which helped also.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Color use, actually.
Yep.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is familiarity once you've looked at a couple of thousand specimens from a particular location, you start to get your eye in. And so your early analysis of, like when I first started looking at the Lake Boga material I collected, I was making wild guesses all the time. Now my wild guesses are just a little more constrained.
Educated wild guesses.
Between calcite and meltite.
There's no calcite there.
Then you run into a place like the Silver Coin Mine in Nevada, where you've got iron, Brazilianite, and about 6 or 7 other minerals that look identical.
Yep.
And you would have to analyze every single specimen because there's no way to visually separate them.
Oh, I know.
So a lot of them go in with
find that they're all intergrown like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was my point before as well, with when you're looking at things like the chlorargyrite, bromargyrite as an example. Even within one crystal, some of the analysis said it started off life as chlorargyrite, then there was a second lot of fluids coming through, and it grew bromargyrite, but somewhere in the spectrum, and then it changed again, and you got something else coming in. And so the one crystal on the one specimen can have different species in it. That gets really tough doing that. Unless you
just make your labels really, really vague.
It comes back to the most important thing is the locality.
Yes, absolutely.
Because sometime in the future, somebody else can actually come up with a U-Butte way of saying instantly the mineral specimen are blah, blah, blah. And so long as you've got that locality, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. If there's no more questions, we'll finish up for today, and everybody have a great holiday season, Christmas, Xmas, whatever you determine it to be. These days, it's bit hard to actually work out what people call this time of the year, but
Coffee time.
Coffee time sounds good.
There you go.
Have a great coffee time, and we will come back on the 26th of January, my time, so 25th for the majority of you guys. And I will put up placeholders for the first few months or whatever, sometime in the next couple of weeks, and I'll let everybody know that they can go there and register. So even if there's not a subject listed, register anyway, and you'll be able to then add it to your personal calendars, and hopefully be able to join us.
Yeah, brilliant.
I'm working on the Australian collections. So somewhere in spring I could do some presentations on it.
That would be good.
If you like.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, all, and
Thanks,
we'll
Steve.
talk to you soon.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Merry
Cheers,
everyone.
everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Bye, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to everybody.
Merry Christmas, everybody. See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.